A Washington House committee voted to advance a bill that would broaden the definition of a hate crime in the state. TJ Martinell with the Center Square is here with more. TJ, how would this bill change existing state laws around hate crimes?
So, under existing state law, a hate crime is when someone commits an act of violence or destruction of property or damage to property uh, based on a perception of a person's identity. So that law was changed because originally it said victim, but now they just say a person's perceived identity, and they have a long list of different identities that are protected under our state's hate crime law. This bill would change that by making it a hate crime if someone did so in part or the whole based on the perception of the identity. So currently, for it to be a hate crime, the only motive for a person doing the act is based on the person's identity. But if they had other motivating factors, so if somebody broke into somebody's house and was for the purpose of stealing stuff and ended up committing an act of violence against a person based on their perceived identity in during the burglary or robbery, whatever it is, that would not be prosecuted as a hate crime because it wasn't based entirely on that. So this is what this bill is trying to change.
There were um, some comments made by a committee member that have raised questions about just how widely this legislation would apply. Can you get into those comments?
Yeah, so there are concerns of certain lawmakers who vote against the bill is that it's broad in the sense that it's based on perception. And it's not based on the perception of the person who is being prosecuted. It's based on the perception of the alleged victim, on a person who's not even a victim of the crime, and based on the perception of the prosecutors who decide whether or not to take it to court. So somebody could theoretically have committed, be prosecuted and convicted of committing a hate crime who they didn't consider it a hate crime. And but the problem is they're prosecuting them based on a motive, but the only person who knows that motive is the person committing the act. And so unless it's like clearly provable in some way, shape, or form. And what's interesting about our state law as it's currently written is that prosecutors are allowed or and directed to infer that a person committed a crime based on the person's perceived identity unless proven otherwise. Like that is, and that was something that was raised during one of the committee meetings, the public hearing for the bill by one lawmaker, and she actually had it read into the record because people were disputing whether or not that's what the state law as it is currently written says. The other issue that was raised is the what they consider to be a selective enforcement. So certain things are considered hate crime, but one example by Representative Dan Griffey, he kept asking people who are testifying in favor of the bill, if someone trespassed on his property and burned the American flag he has displayed outside his house, would it be considered a hate crime? And the responses he got, for the most part, were, I don't know. And there was even the King County prosecutor who prosecutes hate crimes. He asked her the same question, and she said, I don't know. It would depend. So for someone like Representative Griffey, it seems like that should be considered a hate crime, but it's not because it's not included among the identities that are protected by this law.
And there was a specific example that one of the legislators in favor of this bill gave of something she thought should be a hate crime.
Yeah.
What was that?
So according to her, she said that she was on a bus or some sort of form of public transit, and there was a woman wearing that head covering. I'm not sure what the proper word is for it, but an individual also on that same public transit was berating her for it, and according to the lawmaker was kicking and screaming and saying that their religion was different from hers. And to her, she thinks she reported it to the police allegedly, and allegedly the police said we can't do anything about it because um, for for various reasons. But she thinks that should be something that you could go to jail for. The issue with this, and it was actually raised by one of the lawmakers, is they were kicking and screaming, but they weren't physically attacking the person. They weren't threatening to attack the person. They weren't they didn't damage any property. They didn't physically attack this woman. They simply stated they used profanity and they were vulgar in what they said. But as one lawmaker pointed out, that if anything, that's verbal harassment. But that's there's no calling that a hate crime is an issue because the person's not committing any violence. So under our state hate crime law, a hate crime is when you physically attack someone or cause damage to prop or destruction of property. Neither one of those occurred in this case. So this is where it's getting into instances where mere speech could be potentially subject to prosecution.
So, where is this bill at in the process now?
So it passed out of the House Community Safety Committee last week, and it's been referred to the Rules Committee, and that is the final committee before it goes on to the House floor for a vote. So it's being fast tracked through the legislative process. So it could potentially be up for a vote very soon.
Well, TJ, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.